and welcome to yet another episode of Studs Up. We are in season 2. Yes, that is right. Season 2 of this platform where we speak about only women's football. And as I said before, it's a platform where we celebrate, we educate, tell the beautiful stories. So this is where the beautiful game meets the beautiful stories. And like I always say, I always bring amazing people to this platform. And I'm really excited for this conversation because today's conversation we are speaking about the big C, commercialization of women's football. And who best to have in studio than Nqobile Ndlovu, who is one of the best researchers I've ever met, one of very few in the country, I would say, in the business of sports in general. So it's not just women's football, it does all sports. But I'm not going to do the introduction because I am not doing justice. I will hand it over to my dear friend. How
What
are
are you talking
you?
about? That was a great intro. Haibo, doing justice.
How are you?
I'm good, Indira. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming. He's so busy. Every day, every day. I can't believe you are here. So I really, really, really from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank you.
No,
for your
thank you so
time.
much for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So I was actually thinking the other day, where did we meet? Where did we meet?
Wow. I think we met for the first time at a sports conference. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a Nielsen breakfast at the Wanderers, or it may have been somewhere else. I don't remember. But it's a few years ago now. It must be maybe 4 years or something like that. Yeah, and I mean, there's not a lot of people who really focus on women's football
100%, yeah.
like you do. So yeah, and a lot of people who focus on women's football tend to not understand the commercial side
Yeah.
things. So it's always been great to chat to you because I can always ask you stuff and you're like, okay, well, this is what's going on. And then we've kind of dilly-dallied in terms of trying to work on commercialization models and stuff like that. So, but it's been a while. I don't remember exactly
You
when.
know, the funny thing is we probably met for the first time 4 years ago,
Mm.
but we've known of your presence way before that, and I didn't even know it was you.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part.
Yeah, because I took my profile picture and all of that stuff out of the social media platforms. But I mean, I've been around doing content on sports business on the African continent since I would say 2019, so just before the pandemic really got going. Because that was when I really started to take it seriously and
Yeah.
start putting out stuff on a weekly basis. But yeah, I've been doing it for quite a bit of time. It's been 6 years now that I've been constantly
So where
putting
did
out
where did it
content.
actually start? Like, how did you obviously didn't just your first job, let's say, was not into doing sports research and the business side of it. How did it start, and how did you pivot to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy story. I shunned education at school, so I was like, varsity is not my thing. I dropped out of varsity. But I always had a passion for sport because my dad played semi-professional football. My cousins played. I've even got a nephew now who plays in the third division in England.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for sport, but also at the same time, I had to earn a living, somehow. So I went off and worked in a bank in the fraud and card division. So I learned how to investigate and find information because we would be. So if your card was stolen, we would be the team who would look at who stole your card, when it was stolen, and kind of find out that it was fraud, etc., and then try to trace back to the people who stole it so that we can either get them arrested or whatever it is, or get your money back. So I had to learn how to find information. So that's where my kind of inquisitive, kind of deep hole part came in. And then in the early 2000s, I also used to write some columns on News 24 on sport and stuff like that, but I hadn't really kind of pieced together the pieces around that. And then quite a bit further down the line, I left the bank and I went to work for a call center for a company which ended up becoming Betway. the sports betting company. I think I was employee number 5 in the Betway group, because before then it wasn't Betway. It was an online casino group.
Okay.
And they were writing articles on sport, and I hated it. So I volunteered to write for them after hours. So I would have a full-time day job, and I volunteered to write articles for them because I thought that the
No
articles
wonder
that they
this
were
is where
writing
your
were rubbish.
work ethic came from, right?
Yeah,
Working
yeah.
overnight.
Yeah,
And
so I would do that overnight, and then eventually became an employee of the Betway group proper. So I stopped doing all of my casino stuff and the fraud investigation stuff, and I focused on doing that. And then eventually they started getting me into the new markets team, where we would go into countries and try and find out what's going on, because Betway has a philosophy that they sponsor a team wherever they are physically on the ground. And we could never find information on the commercial side. So we were asked to find how much do teams want in terms of sponsorship, how much are brands relatively paying in terms of sponsorship, and I basically set myself a target in 2017, and I said I'm going to be Africa's leading provider for insight on the business of sport. I didn't know what the hell that was, by the way. So for a year, I kind of put it off. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, okay, well, I've got a lot of time now. So every day, I would still work during the day, but every evening, I would be researching a topic, and I started putting out threads on Twitter every Friday from 2019. And from there, I got approached by Nielsen to start to work for them. I initially said no. That was for about 6 months. We eventually decided to form a company, which became Cash and Sport, and Cash and Sport has been my business and life since then.
well, thank God for cash and sport, huh?
Yeah, well, I guess
For
I
us,
guess
I'm saying for us, because
Ye-
the information that we get from there is like you said, you are the leading.
Well, the wild thing is, when I started putting out these threads, I didn't know that there was such a thing as a business of sport and that you could charge people for it. So Nielsen said, well, you're putting out information that we're charging people money for. Like, what are you doing?
So you're killing our business concept.
Yeah, but then I was doing it was just fun. It was just fun.
Yeah.
And then I started to learn once we started working together with Nielsen, that there was actually a massive industry and all of that. But yeah.
And since then, you've worked with a lot of corporates. You've done a lot of insight and research for a lot of corporates before going into sponsorships and all
Yeah.
that.
So since then, I've worked with brands like, Adidas, did a lot of reports for Supersport. I still do work with Nielsen now on sponsorship tracking. You'll see on the social media platforms, we put out news on sponsorships on almost daily basis. And this isn't just South Africa, it's across the continent. But yeah, done reports for Discovery, worked with, last year did a big report for about 6 months with the United Nations, or well, OECD, which is part of the United Nations, the African Union, and yeah, plenty. So
We're going to go into the crux of the conversation.
yeah,
But as you're speaking, I'm intrigued. Research is hard.
yeah.
Research is very hard. And some of the information that you get is actually mind-boggling, where you get, like, how do you navigate getting information?
Yeah, so for me, a lot of people say research is hard because they don't want to look. So I built an appetite for finding information when I was in the bank, because I would have to find. You just get an alert for a transaction. All you have is an IP address and a card, and what the person bought, and you have to try and find who made that transaction, or whether the actual cardholder made that transaction, or whether it was a thief or whoever it is that made that transaction. That's very difficult. So the appetite and the stamina to find information was built then. So how I find information now is, a lot of the information that I find is publicly available information. It's just people don't want to look. I know where to look. So for example,
You don't have to tell us your trade
No,
secrets.
it's fine because it's not difficult.
Okay.
It's just if people spent the time and they built the institutional kind of memory and the networks and stuff. So I mean, for example, I track parliament meetings for sports bodies on a daily basis. I have an alert that goes to my Google inbox, and it says whenever there's sport mentioned in parliament, I track it, I get a notification, I go and I listen to the minutes and I read what was said, and you'd be surprised how much information is out there because all of our sports bodies, for example, have to go to parliament and present their annual results, etc., etc. You'd be surprised how much information is there. I track lawsuits on a website. There's a public repository for law cases, and whenever there's a law, whenever there's sport or a sports team, I again have an alert. It tracks, and I know. So there's a lot of stuff that you would never see me publicly posting, because some stuff is more harmful than it is good. So yeah, I spend a lot of time. A lot of my time. For example, today, yesterday while I was researching for this topic, I ended up watching something that led me to a crazy story that I'm going to put out whenever I've finished researching it, about a German South African citizen who was busted for carrying 20 kilograms of cocaine and is helping to fund one of the largest syndicates in Ireland. Like, but you have to go down rabbit holes constantly. If you stop at the first piece of information that you get, you only get the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I like to go all the way down and even beneath the iceberg to find what else is happening, because that's where you really get an understanding of what's going on. So
I say cash and sport is beneficial for us because I think we've become the generation where we don't want to read, and anything visual that has information is great because then you just watch for 30 seconds, and I think that's our attention span right now.
Yeah.
So that's a very commendable.
Well, my 2-minute videos, because usually my quick takes are between 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes. Usually they take me a day and a half, maybe 2 days or 3 days to research. And it takes us usually about 10 minutes to film, and then they edit it. So then me and the editors then fight about cutting it down to 2 minutes. Because
So there's still information that you
that I have to
make you
leave
take
out
out.
all the time. All the time.
That's crazy. Sure. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So before I ask you any more questions
Yeah.
out of the topic, we're speaking about commercialization of women's football. We've had this conversation many times.
Yeah.
And I think every episode, if not every episode, 90% of every episode of this podcast, it always comes down to the crux of we need a professional league for women's football. But it's not that easy, obviously. Each country, each continent have different economies, different behaviors, culture, everything that essentially adds to the issue of the commercialization of sport.
Yeah.
We always want to compare it to Europe and USA and all of that, but they are a lot more advanced in the African continent. So maybe just I'll play devil's advocate here. Are you able to break down what commercialization means and what it means for sport in general?
Sure. So commercialization means taking your product, being able to sell it, and making money out of it, right? So in sport, it manifests itself in a couple of ways. Number one is usually broadcast rights, because when your product, or as a rights holder, you can approach a broadcast company. Usually they would pay you for the rights to broadcast your content. They would make their money back through advertising. That's number one. Number two, the sponsorship. You would then take your product, go to a brand. Brands always want to reach audiences. And the easier you can make that for them, the easier you can convince them to give you money. And then there's things like merchandise sales, ticket sales, and the like. But those are the two biggest ones. There's broadcast and sponsorship, and then your other ancillary revenue streams, merchandise, tickets, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that's a basic level understanding of what commercialization is. It's essentially being able to fund your operations by selling your product, which is whatever sport it is that you play in, or whatever league it is that you're in. That's a simple explanation for it.
So when we look at the context of African football,
Yeah.
and you know, I don't like comparing men and women because it's two different products, right? We see that even in a men's landscape of commercialization of sport, it's not where it can be.
Yeah.
I mean, South Africa's PSL is one of the best leagues in Africa, if not the best. So if we look at the women's side, there's not a lot of comparisons that we can compare or create a blueprint around the commercialization. I was doing a bit of research and actually trying to find if, you know, there are other leagues that are professional, but it's always like a semi-professional approach. With one top of mind is Morocco. They have a fully fledged professional league. That's what they said. But it's funded by
the government.
The government and the royal. The royal
That's the
family and
RMF,
all of that.
Royal Moroccan Football Association. Yeah.
Yes, and the king and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for us to compare a South African side of women's football to a Moroccan because there is intent to want to, you know.
Yeah, but I believe that you can compare them because ultimately, are there players? Yes. Is there an intention to want to put out women's sport? Yes. Okay. Well, then the question is, how are you doing it? Because then you can definitely compare. For example, in South Africa, women's football is predominantly is predominantly run at university and essentially out if you don't have universities in South African women's football, the pyramid collapses. Because when and this is a common symptomatic issue across all women's sport. This isn't just football. Globally speaking, girls and boys are at the same level until around the age of 13. They play at the same level. They can compete amongst each other. And then what happens is that the opportunities for boys to continue to play increase.
Yes.
The opportunities for girls to continue to play decrease by half. So then there's a split at around about that age. Now, when girls then finish high school, right, the next step for them is university. That's the next logical step, because if you want to make an income or a living, you have to do something, and the quickest way to do that is education. So therefore, all the girls then move into higher education. Boys, a lot of them, stay at that level. Because the moment that they finish, they're about 17, 16 or 18 or whatever, they've been in an academy situation or academy setup, they can then sign a professional contract. They don't need higher education. That's why the levels of education amongst professional athletes are disparately higher in women's sport than in men's sport.
I actually mentioned this
almost more than double, I think.
In a previous episode, they compared, I think, Banyana and Bafana.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Almost every Banyana player has a degree.
Yeah.
You'd say less than half of men's players have a degree. So that's where the split happens. And this is why universities are so important to South African women's football, because it becomes the only actual opportunity for female players to continue playing football. There is no league that that's not really associated with university sports. So that's the breeding ground. Whereas for men's sport, there is already regional leagues, and I'm not saying that there's no regional leagues or regional teams for women to play, but in terms of organized sport where the teams don't have to be self-sufficient and fund themselves, or try to find resources anywhere, it's easier at university level because the university covers the cost. It becomes part of the overall sports bracket, and they assign a little budget towards football, so therefore the girls can play. Whereas with boys, it's very different. So that's the South African context, right? You've got your two leagues, Hollywood Bets Women's Super League, your SASO regional leagues, and that's the feeder. But that's essentially it, and it's all amateur. I don't care for those who say it's semi-professional. There's no such thing.
No, you're right. There's no such thing.
It's essentially amateur.
Yeah. We just make ourselves feel a little bit better.
Right. So that's South Africa. Zambia, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily have such a big university structure, but I think in 2023 they formalized the top league. It was 14 teams, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was 12 teams, and then it became 14. and they've got regional structures much like us, but they're much more. They have a much more concerted effort towards the growth of the national team, which is why you see your Temwas, your Barbaras, etc.,
Yes.
who then come out of that system because they understand that football is the main sport.
Yeah.
They they don't have so for example in South Africa you can go to swimming, cricket, rugby. If you're a girl you can play multiple sports. In Zambia you can essentially play one.
Yeah.
So your best of the best are always focused on one. So that's the sport that they play. If you look at Nigeria, for example, has been around in terms of women's professional football for the longest on the continent. And we must always contextualize this conversation with history. South African women and South African sport was barred from international competition up until 1995. It was a 28-year gap. And professionalizing sport didn't start until 1995, and the conversations around professionalizing women's cricket, rugby, or anything only started in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So we are very far behind everybody else. Nigeria and the others. Nigeria has been, Nigeria, Ghana, for example, in terms of West Africa, the two best teams or two best countries. Their problems are that there is no private sector around sport. So most of it's mostly government entities that fund the teams. Edo Queens, Rivers, what's yeah. So most of them are funded by government, and the problem with government is that government's budgets are never constant. Sport becomes a by the way.
So just to break that down,
Yeah.
If we're speaking about commercializing and professionalizing sport,
Yeah.
it shouldn't sit with government.
It shouldn't.
Okay.
Because government can't commercialize or professionalize individual sport. Government's core function is service delivery to citizens and creating an enabling environment to citizens to thrive, and then everything else is a nice to have. Which is why when this is, I've said this to him directly. When our Minister of Sport then goes and champions individual government projects, and I say to him, but Minister, your job is to create an environment. You can't fund it out of the government coffers because the citizens are going to ask, that's our money.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be, closing potholes and so on and so on. And then the arts culture is going to say, yeah, but you're supposed to send us to another country so we can go and perform, etc. The Minister of Sports cannot fund things. And I've said this to him. I've said to him, when you create expectations on yourself to deliver things, then you have to convince the sporting bodies to deliver on those things. You have to find the money for VAR, right? Give it to the...
Which he said is already half funding. Well, a portion funding.
But this is the problem. You find the money for VAR somehow. But then you have to give that money to SAFA for SAFA to then make that payment in order for VAR to happen. You are not the one who's doing it.
Yeah.
You're always going to be beholden on requiring somebody else to deliver on these promises that you make. And it's always going to put you at odds with the system, because your job is to create an enabling environment, create the structures and so on. If there's problems within organizations, within sporting bodies, fine, deal with those. But then saying, no, but we will fund Formula One, we will fund Live Golf, etc., that's not the ministry's role. My personal opinion on it. And it can be seen to be true in a number of different instances. Apart from things like Live Golf, but even with Live Golf, it's not being funded by government. It's being funded by a number of different companies who've put money together, etc. Even Formula One, there's about 6 companies who are funding Formula One, but it's a project which is being driven by government.
Yeah.
And I understand why they're driving it, because they want people to come to this country,
100%.
spend money, etc., etc. Economic impact, great. But it's not supposed to be funded. It's not true. There are instances where government can put up guarantees, where they're required to put up guarantees. But in our country, in our context, it's very difficult. So, yeah.
So what do you think the role of the ministry then is to try and push the professional league? What should they be actively doing?
So within the context of women's football, I would say that, again, we have an issue with regards to political influence in terms of football, where if, for example, a minister can say, I would like for women's league to be self-sustaining and functional on its own, etc., and apply pressure. But ultimately, he can't force the hand of the federation. And right now, women's football sits within the ambit of the federation. So he can say, I would like for this to happen, and I believe that there should be an autonomous women's league, which, by the way, would be my solution for how we kind of, and I guess we'll get to this later, but he can't implement certain things because, again, there has to be a separation of powers between the ministry and the federations. They have to work still as autonomous bodies, although they can ask for the ministry's help. They do get funding from government and from the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. But the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture can't remove people. It can't assign people. It can't employ people within specific sporting federations.
Sure. Okay. So in your explanation and breaking down what commercialization means, you mentioned items such as broadcast, and under broadcast is streaming and all of that, and that's obviously an avenue where professional sports, make their money. The rights holders obviously
about 60 to 70% of most rights holder revenue comes from broadcasting.
Yeah. So there was a stat, I think a couple of years ago, you at the Momentum breakfast, I think speaking about women's sports. And at that time, the global percentage of broadcasted women's sports was between 5 to 6% or 4 to 5%.
Yeah.
Something so crazy as...
I think it was 3 to 5% in 2023. It's gone up now to
about 15,
to about 15, 16%. Yeah.
And they also said by the end of 2025, they would hope that it would get to about 25%.
It's not there.
It's not there yet, clearly, because nothing has come out to validate that type of thing. So when we look at broadcast around women's football, I mean, again, I will bring up things that is happening globally and not just in the African continent. The World Cup, 2 billion viewers, doubled from what 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup was. Then one of the games, England versus Spain, 13 million. Australia, semi-final between Australia and England, 11 million. Streaming records are going high. Then it's just, the numbers just keep getting higher and higher. And if I bring it back to the African context, where AFCON in 2022, we were seeing record-breaking numbers. I can't really speak about 2024 because for some reason there was just a decline. We just didn't get enough, or maybe I didn't research deep enough to find that. So how is it that we are still struggling to broadcast women's sports and women's football globally if we are getting record numbers?
Because the issue isn't are the top tier competitions performing, it's what happens on a day-to-day. So your broadcast agreements usually are competition based. So for example, if you've got a Hollywood Bets Women's Super League, right? Primary broadcaster should be being the SABC, but they don't broadcast all the matches, and they would say that the challenge is that. So remember, for the SABC to broadcast a game, they have to get an OB van out to the venue. They have to get a team out to the venue. You set up, usually it's a 4-camera setup or maybe more, depending on the size of the game. So they have to allocate resources to that. For them, it costs them more to produce than the revenue that they might potentially get back, because again, because it's, number one, it's free to air. Number two, they may not get the same number of advertisers in a women's game versus a men's game. So for them, it may not necessarily be worth it. Even though they're the primary broadcaster, they still need to make money out of that broadcast.
But before you carry on, they may not get the same number of advertisers, but if you look at the Hollywood Bet Super League numbers, and my numbers are based on 2024, they're a lot higher than a lot of the PSL matches. And again, I don't want to compare, but if we're looking at how many eyeballs, I mean, it was a cumulative of 14 million viewers over the season of 2024. So is it a conversation then Is it SABC or the broadcast?
No,
or
so
is it the rights holder?
so generally speaking, the SABC mostly doesn't. They don't really like to put out sport or to produce sport or broadcast sport. They'll say that they'll probably deny it when with someone, if someone sends us to them and says, but I recall even in their financial results, I think it was 2019, 2020, they said sport costs them more money to broadcast than the revenue that they generate. And it's not just football. But the problem is that, for example, the Hollywood Bets Super League broadcast agreement, right? Hollywood Bets pays the league, pays what, 17 million. Hollywood Bets pays what, 17 million on an annual basis. The PSL's broadcast rights agreement, 630 million. So there's no comparison really between the two.
100%.
And MultiChoice will pay top dollar for the PSL.
Yeah.
But the SABC is willing to pay far less for the league. So therefore, comparing apples and oranges in terms of whether there's any. So there might be good viewership within the SABC context, but because the SABC is generating so little revenue, it doesn't really count. It just doesn't equate. It doesn't equate to the same. So for example, the question then is, okay, well then should the Hollywood Bets Women's Super League not go on SuperSport? Well, the question is then, does SuperSport see the value? Would they feel that there would be value? Would they want to pay for it? And I think their answer at the moment is no. And my personal opinion is that it shouldn't, because if you want to grow the game, the fastest way to grow the game is to have it on free to air, right? And have it easily available to people so that as many people can watch as possible. But the problem right now is we don't have commercial models around the women's league to take care to not only encourage viewership, but to also build models around sponsorship and the like right now at the moment. And this is why I think that this is the biggest issue, is that there isn't opportunity for teams to want for brands to want to get involved in women's football. And this is part of the reason why I think a lot of teams, even the men's teams, don't want to have a women's football team, because how do you commercialize it? You're essentially throwing money into a bucket, with holes at the bottom of it.
So I was also trying to make sure that I had the right information around how much do brands want to get involved with women's football teams. I mean, again, we see there's still PSL teams that don't have sponsorship, front of the jersey sponsorships, and we know that they get all of the games I mean, it's prime for any brand. Is it? Do you feel like it's just brands are just not interested in the sport, or is it the perception around the sport? Because at the end of the day, football is the biggest sport in South Africa.
I've often said this. There isn't an issue around return on investment or audience in the PSL or in women's football. If you were to compare women's football, women's rugby, women's cricket, there isn't an issue of audience. It's clearly that football stands above all else. But football, for one, has a PR problem in that the perception of challenges in football are amplified much higher than they are in other sports, number one. And people will say, oh no, but Mamkhize and all of that. Okay, cool. I think 4 of our domestic men's cricket sides in the last 3 years have gone into administration. Cricket South Africa have had to try and redo the 2 domestic cricket structures in men's cricket twice in the past 10 years, because the commercial structures don't exist and people don't actually want to watch it. And the domestic Rams, it used to be called the Ram Slam T20 League, etc., has almost no viewership, and fans don't go to stadiums. If you get 200 fans at a game, you're lucky. So that's the state of cricket. In rugby, the Currie Cup as a competition is dying. They've had to try and revamp it a number of times, so much so that the Cheetahs 2 weeks ago had to be bailed out financially because they couldn't pay salaries. But that's not really a story that's in the news, right? Because again, the perception is that rugby is doing fantastically well. What people fail to realize is that rugby depends on the Springboks. 90% of SA rugby revenue is made out of the Springboks. The rest of the pyramid is basically is not really carrying its own weight. So there are problems in other sports. Those problems in football, though, are amplified to the max. But we also don't help ourselves. My personal perception is that status sales are another major problem. Because if you have a football club that exists today and can be sold tomorrow via status sale, where a team in the NFD can switch sides with a team in the PSL tomorrow, and it's legally allowed by the league. And not only that, if you buy a football club today, you can move it to Polokwane or wherever it is. You disenfranchise all the fans. You disenfranchise the brands, because the brands are trying to build something around that local community, etc., etc. They have nothing to tie back to. So therefore you ask the brands, well, why would, can you sponsor this team? And then they say, okay, well, this team's been around for maybe a couple of years. Cool. Will they be around in 3? Because usually most sponsorship deals are about 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Can you guarantee that the team will be there in 5 years? No. Okay, fine. Who's the audience? What do we know about the audience, etc., etc., etc. Most PSL teams cannot tell you a thing about their audience. Not one. They can't build a commercial structure. They can't say, this is, we've got 50% of our audiences of this age. They consume this product. This is their LSM. This is their kind of profile, etc. Because that's how you build a sponsorship deck. When you go to a sponsor and you say, we want you to spend 50 million, they're going to ask you, okay, well, who are we buying it for? Not just because you're a team in the league. Because a lot of brands don't need brand exposure.
Yeah.
They're already known. What they need is an audience to tap into so that they can market directly to them. Do you have their cell phone number? Do you know what their names are, etc., etc.? What age are they?
So let's say, because I've been involved in trying to also find sponsorship for clubs, women's football clubs. And that's the one thing I do tell them all the time, is know who your audience are. Don't just, it's not, yes, it's 50% women, 50% men or whatever, down to the detail, where you know that you can use them for any marketing, whatever you're going to do, right? And the argument that always comes back is, yes, but we know our audience, and when we seek sponsorship, that's the information we give and we get nothing back.
Yeah, but you're going to have to give something to get something, But ultimately, I think it's also very difficult for brands to get involved still in women's football at the moment, because there's one big elephant in the room, which is that on every front of every team's shirt is one brand, and you can't remove it. So even if you were to go and ask for a sleeve sponsorship slot, you can't get it. If you were to, the league is named after, and this isn't a slight on Hollywood Bets. Hollywood Bets has done well for the league in terms of elevating the league, allowing for the league to go on, etc., etc. But the model has essentially put off anybody else who wants to get involved in women's football. Because how do you then get involved?
Yeah.
Not every match is broadcast. Okay. Maybe we can get around that if some of the matches are broadcast on YouTube, etc., etc. But there isn't really any storytelling about the league outside of what you see on the league. Go onto the social media platforms. Is there constant activity on the Hollywood Bets on the league's social media platforms? No, there isn't. So much so that sometimes you go and you look for score results. The results are not the same on multiple platforms because the information is incorrect. Okay, fine. Maybe we can get around that. Okay, are there any stories around the individual players? Plenty of them. Do you see them publicly? No, you don't. You know nothing about who the players are, what their stories are. You can't even build products and so on around the players. You only see them when they play for Banyana. Outside of that, you don't see any stories about the athletes or the players. So you can't really build any brand equity around the Hollywood Bets Women's Super League at the moment.
Do you think it's a ask for the clubs to also do that?
Well, I think the clubs are using it as an excuse and as a reason to not get involved, because they say, well, then we can't commercialize it. We're just putting money into a bucket, as I said earlier. But I think that the best thing that the league can do, and we were talking about comparisons earlier, in England, the Women's Super League has officially split away from the Premier League.
I was going to get to that, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Split away from the Premier League, do their own thing, have your own team and your own people dedicated specifically to women's sport. Because
100%.
the other problem that we have is that if you ask the men's teams in this country to do it, the women's teams will always be a by the way. It's like a little bonus that they give you. You know, we want 50 million, and also you'll get to use some female players in your programming to make it look like
We're inclusive.
we're inclusive. When actually it's a by the way. It's like it's like it's like, you know, when you were younger and you would buy sweets and you'd have little 10 cents left at the end, and then they give you a little mint there to say, okay, sharp, you know. But that can't be the way you manage the package,
Yeah.
because it will always be seen as a bonus, and it won't ever be seen as a standalone product that you invest in on its own.
So it goes back to essentially what you're saying is we don't have enough or the right people packaging sports as a whole.
It's starting to happen. SA Rugby is very aware that they can't leave women's rugby behind. They were very, very behind. Women's football in South Africa, I think we played our first international in
93, I think.
93.
It was still during apartheid, even.
Right? 93. And we continued to play even after apartheid, etc., etc. Do you know when women's rugby started up proper? We had one team for both of our codes, which is 15s and 7s. One. This was and SA Rugby took a very deliberate stance of saying, if we're not going to do this properly, we're not going to do it at all. So they stopped rugby for a period of, I think it was 3 to 5 years, where they went through a collaborative process with all of the unions and all of the federations to say, okay, we've been messing around with what we've been trying to do with rugby because we've been kind of just giving it lip service. Let's do it properly and realign it. Just before the 2019, I think it was 2019 Rugby World Cup, the year before rugby started properly, where they said, we're going to have a team, we're going to then try and split our team between a 7s and a 15s team, and then we're going to build a pathway towards professionalization. Less than a month ago, they announced professionalization. What have we been doing since 1993? Because we only got a Hollywood Bets Women's Super League in 2021.
Yeah, so the National League started in 2019.
Yeah.
Got interrupted by COVID.
Yeah,
And
but
that's
then
when they
came back in
announced-
2021
Yeah.
with Hollywood as a sponsor. So Hollywood has done well to bring it back, because I don't know what would have happened, right? But you can clearly see there's big parallels. And what happened with the women's rugby? The first World Cup, we lost all of our matches.
Yeah.
The second World Cup, we beat Italy. We ran France very, very close.
Yes, and
we ran England
very
very,
close.
very
And then we
close.
made it to the next
And
round.
we made it to the second round.
Yeah.
We now have players playing overseas.
Yep.
Babalola Lacha was playing overseas until just this last season.
She's back in
Asiza
the Big
Hele,
Western Province.
quite a few players
Yeah.
playing overseas. I can guarantee you, if we continue going in the way that we're going now, South African women's rugby will be playing in a quarterfinal slot in the next 2 World Cups.
Did you guys hear that?
But the investment and the structures that we've built around women's football are nowhere near that. Actually, my personal opinion is that women's football in South Africa is regressing, and we're going backwards. Because just look at the performances and the results. Prior to going to the World Cup in New Zealand and Australia, we were probably South Africa's best team.
Yeah.
Right? After that World Cup, Morocco has invested heavily in women's football, 2 divisions, fully paid, with stipends, not stipends,
But
salaries.
because there was an
every month.
intention in 2020.
No, yes.
They said it was going to be a 5-year project that
Yes,
they would make
absolutely. And they've made sure that
Yeah.
they've delivered on it. But as far now, are the best women's team on the continent. They even went and represented us in Europe
Yeah,
against,
the
I forget the name of
World
the...
Cup.
Yeah. They, if they were to play, any team in South Africa now, they'd probably win. And I'm not saying, and this isn't, and this is also because of there's been issues at Sundowns ladies, etc., etc. But still, they've built a strong team. And when players can play on a consistent basis, they don't have to worry about 12-hour bus trips, receiving a stipend for sanitary pads, and having to work an 8 to 5 and training maybe 3 hours because you can't. And then maybe some players have kids that they have to take care of. It's an impossible ask to ask players to play a game at the end of the week when they've worked a 40-hour week and they've only trained for maybe 8 hours in a week, and they've barely slept in that week. Like you're asking to lose.
Yeah.
So
But an argument can be, I mean, you mentioned Sundowns. Sundowns are, I mean, they have the financial means.
yes,
No one from Sundowns, the players don't work.
Yeah.
They fully focus on, playing the game, being professionals in their own setup.
that's
But
one team.
but
The,
fail
the,
to...
the problem is that you can't create a standard of excellence when everybody else isn't at that same level. Sundowns ladies need to be challenged domestically. Because when you get to international level and you're playing against let me say intercontinental level and international level, what you're playing against, and this is why you often see in men's football, for example, where for a very long time PSG would cook everybody in the league,
dominate, yeah.
get to the
Champions
intercontinentals,
League.
and then it's
Yeah.
teka-taking because the standard isn't high enough. They've changed things slightly with the makeup of the teams, etc., etc. But that was the big problem for a
Yeah.
long time. You need to raise the standard for everybody else, right? Bring everybody to the same level. Then you'll automatically raise this, because they will also realize at that level that, we need to up our game now.
But how do you raise the standard?
So I've got a blueprint, I think, because while I was researching for this conversation, I thought, okay, well, let me make it a mini report, right? So I'll send you the mini report off, when I get home later today. But my blueprint is I think is in 4 ways.
Is that a report allowed to be published?
You can publish it, it's
Okay.
fine. My mini report is in 4 ways. My blueprint is this. Number 1, separate women's football
100% agree.
from the Football Association. Number 1. And my blueprint doesn't do anything that's unique to the world. It steals a bit from here and
Bits
there and
and-
kind
yeah.
of puts one thing together. So separate. So this is the England model. Separate. Number 2, make it about content and fans and make it as easily accessible as possible. This is the Mexico. The Mexican league has broadcast times that are favorable for family viewing. The content is viewable, usually for free on YouTube sometimes, and it's very TikTok focused, very content focused, and it's very about telling the stories of the players. So much so that they've almost tripled their viewership, and they're now getting viewership almost akin to the domestic men's league. So you have to make it accessible. Don't worry about the money to start. Your investors need to know that, and you have to try and make it as easily accessible as possible, build a great story around it, and then increase the viewership so that you can get ads and so on and so on. But the investors have to know that you may not make any money for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's number 2. Number 3 is you have to build a commercial structure which understands that your aim is to export players, because you have to export your story. Our problem is, if we're only going to concentrate on South Africa as the market, you're going to lose the game, right? And this is a recommendation even for men's football. We're too focused on here. It's great, Shushan and piano, great. Keep the Shushan and piano but export it. Because once you can export it, you can charge people in dollars, euros, etc., etc. And by exporting it, I mean this. We have a lot of good talent here, right? But if people know that, for example, look at what happened with TLP in Bogazi. Those Chicago Fire social media people don't know what hit them, right? Now people are concentrating, South Africa's got great players, etc., etc. Okay, maybe let me go and see what's happening there.
another look.
Take another look. But when you come here, you better know that you're not, just because it's Africa doesn't mean it's cheap, right? So you export the product. And then number 4 is boiled down. We don't have, well, I should say number 3 is boiled down, and then number 4 is exported. We don't have a football pyramid in women's football that is under 12, under 10, under blah, 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 and bubbling up.
But to be fair, it's kind of
it's growing,
we are
but
starting,
start at the bottom,
yeah,
and have it consistent and have standards all the way up, and have all of that content broadcast, have cameras in people's faces constantly,
yeah,
because then you can tell stories from an under 15 to an under 25.
Yeah.
You can tell story to an under 20 or whatever it is, or senior football. Because if you don't do that, in this world that we live in now, where people are constantly on their phones and constantly engaging, you need to be telling stories on a constant basis.
But a slight caution with having cameras at such a young age is it builds, it like knocks on the psyche of some of the kids, and I speak this from I'll bring rugby again, for example. I work with the agency that I work for, we work on a high school rugby project, and there's small competitors in the space, and with sometimes when you speak to some of the headmasters and the sporting directors of the schools, the worry is because it's become so competitive at such a young level, it's like eating off the confidence and the psyche and all of that of the kids, when they're supposed to be playing and enjoying the game rather than having to play and wanting to win. And it creates a monster out of players at such a young age. So how do you find that balance? Because I hear you that, I mean, it's been happening in Europe for years. I mean, if you go to an FC Barcelona, and I know I'm taking it way out of, but you can find footage of under 11, under 9, under 7 player who's one day is going to play for the first team, but they have that footage from like long ago, and it seems to have worked.
The secret is not make age group football about winning. It's just about playing. So much so that you remove things such as results.
Development coaches can hear this. Yes. Okay.
Because the problem is I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, I put out a video on commercialization in school sport, and I haven't stopped hearing from.
I saw the comments.
There were more.
I saw those comments.
Yeah, I haven't stopped hearing. But part of the issue is when you commercialize school sports too much, you start building exactly what you said. But school sports still needs coverage because these kids want to be seen.
Yeah.
Right? So all you do is you say, for example, the best performing team in Europe this past year that people didn't know about was a small team called Bodo Glimt. They got knocked out in the there was a dodgy penalty or whatever, but they got knocked out by Sporting this past week in the Champions League. But in their entire academy system and even up to the senior team, there are no results. There's no winning in training matches. You don't win anything. You're just playing. Even at youth football, there's no winning. It's just cool. How good are you at that? Oh, that's great. And just concentrate on just getting the players better and better and better and better and better. So when they play without the expectation of winning, there's no guardrails.
Yeah.
There's no, just because you scored a goal, you're just another player.
Yeah.
Right? But you can build that into the system, but still film everything and catalog everything, etc., etc. Part of the reason also why I say you have to catalog everything is because then you can tell stories all the 100%. Time. Because what do brands want? Brands love to say, oh no, we want to sponsor because of good of society and
They want to be a part of that story.
Yeah, they want to be part of the story. They want to be able to tell stories because then they can go to the board and say, look at this great
brand
video
equity.
that's 5 minutes long and it's wonderful things that are being said about our brand. That's what they want, right? Outside of being able to sell the product that they sell to you, a lot of them, if it wasn't for these lovely stories, they would have big problems in terms of their brand reputation.
Yeah.
and this isn't like, for example, Sasol. Sasol is a great company, but it creates petrochemicals. It's not a really sexy industry, right? But the mere fact that they're involved in women's football allows them to tell a great story about their brand.
Yeah.
Petrochemicals aren't really, they sell themselves. Nobody really is. If you go to
Don't
the
need
gas
marketing
station,
around
you
it,
don't
yeah.
need marketing around petrochemicals. The story allows you to shape yourself differently. All of a sudden, being driven by Sasol, you know what I mean? Allows you to tell a very different story.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go into in stadium
Yeah.
and attendance, because
Yeah.
that's also another big thing.
Yeah.
Ticket sales for commercialization is important. So we look at, again, in the context of South African sport.
Yeah.
We can say it's because of COVID. COVID really hit a knock in people starting to come to stadiums, but there's still a big lack in men's side of in stadium attendance, unless it's a derby or top of the table clash. But more so on the women's side, it's even worse. And I always say, and you allude to it earlier, is it's the PR behind it. I personally feel like it's a PR behind it, but it's not that we short of supporters. I mean, people, we know Sundowns, they play from Lucas Moripi, the women's team, and they can get about 100 plus people at the stadium. JVW sometimes get a couple of numbers. UWC, they're one of the only teams actually that sell tickets for people to actually go into stadium. And I'm actually waiting to hear what those numbers look like. But a club that everybody's overlooking, and it goes back to your stance about university teams. University of Forte. There were games that they were streamed on the Facebook page, and the stadium was packed. Not even a Sundowns ladies team has ever had a packed stadium, and it's not just a one
it's
game.
constant.
It's a consistent thing. So, like, and then we speak about, and we can take it back to the context of also varsity football. I mean, you go to any varsity football game, and it's packed. At varsity sports is packed. Is it the economy of university that is just working because, like you said, it's men and women are on basically the same platform, allowing the same opportunities to be able to play the sport? How do we take that and put it into the women's football context? How do we get the people in the stadium?
Yeah. Sport in this country generally has a problem around attendance. My last research on attendance across the country for all sports was that we had an average of about between 12 and 18% occupancy rate of stadiums.
Sure.
That means your stadium is between 12 and 18% full for average matches. And then obviously your big matches, your URC derbies, your SA20 league matches, etc., massively spike up the numbers. But if you were to look at a mean average, it would be about 12 to 18%. That's across all of our teams. So even if you bring in that's obviously excluding teams like Kaizer Chiefs, Pirates, and the like. But that's at football level. It gets terrible if at other sports. Like, for example, a few weeks ago, the Lions were playing the Bulls in a domestic URC fixture, and it was you had entire stands which were empty. So it's not a unique problem to football, but the universities and the school space shows you that fandom is there. It's not an issue of bringing people out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 100,000 people at Live Golf at Stain City, the highest they've ever recorded at a Live Golf event for over 4 days. We don't have an issue of fans in this country. We have an issue of connecting to fans. Back in the day, there used to be people called PROs, right? Who used to go out into the townships and say, come to the stadium. They used to have gold rings and la 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 la. They made a spectacle out of the match. and they wanted you to come into the into the match environment.
Did those people exist back in the day when PSL, early days of
Yeah,
PSL, that's what it was,
when the
super
PS
full
yeah, when it was
games
super
all the
full, you
time.
would have the PROs of the club were sometimes even more popular than the players, because they were larger than life characters. Alex Shakwane, who's Mr. Hands of Gold, with his gold rings on every finger. They called him gold rings because they called him gold fingers, because he was a blingy, larger than life character. He would rally up the fans. They would go into communities all the time and bring fans out. But with the advent of our exclusive agreements with SuperSport as the primary broadcaster, a lot of that content is now available to watch on a consistent basis. That's taken fans away from stadiums, in my view, in some ways. But also, a lot of the PSL teams and a lot of the domestic sports teams haven't done a good enough job around the fan experience element. You have unassigned seating at PSL matches. Terrible exponent, because you want to go and sit in a specific place, enjoy your drink or whatever, and leave.
Yeah.
Enjoy the match and leave. Not everybody wants to be extra strong.
Yeah.
Just because there's an extra strong concept. So, your parking situation or your driving, your experience, it can't take you
It's a lot.
it can't take you 3 hours to get into the stadium. You can't find your seat. Some random person is sitting there. Then you have to go and find a seat somewhere else. And, concessions are a problem. You can't get network signal because there's no connectivity. It's the stadium experience isn't great. It's better in other sports. In football, it's terrible.
But then that should mean that for women's football, there's an opportunity to see what is
Yeah.
happening and make
This
a difference.
is why, again, separate it. Have a standalone entity that deals specifically with women's football. They are family and enjoy and venue first, and you guys need to come, have a good time with your kids. And it's not to say that that's the only way you can grow women's football.
Yeah.
But make it an environment which is conducive for fans to want to come.
Yeah.
Right? Because they know that most of the games aren't broadcast anyway. So, standalone entity constantly marketing the league on people's TikToks and on their socials, on their Instagram reels, etc., etc., driving people to want to come to the match. Come to the match, you meet with the players, have fun with the players, and even have what we used to have back in the day. I think rugby has also started doing it, where they have curtain raisers, and they have the women's teams playing with the men, just before or just after the men's team. Usually just before is better, because then you can take advantage of that 2-hour window and infuse them into the environment. But at the moment, it's just everybody puts out a match. Sports rights holders forget that you are in a content business. What happens for 90 minutes is 90 minutes. For the rest of the week, you're competing with Netflix, with whatever DSTV, whatever it is, whatever else that is that you see on television. And if you're not constantly on people's minds or constantly saying, "Oh, that's a nice piece of content," people are going to forget about you. By the time it comes to the weekend, they don't remember the last match.
Yeah.
And there's so many casual fans that you have to find different ways of engaging with them. And unfortunately, at the moment, we can't just engage with them just through the match alone.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
So what I'm getting to it is the main thing is just connection to the fans.
Yeah. You have to connect with fans.
Regardless of the right hold, just teams alone as well.
Yeah.
They need to connect to their people.
Yeah. And actually, I think we're in a people bemoan what's happening with Canal Plus. I think it's going to be a good thing for our sports teams. A lot of them are going to lose money, and they're going to lose those rights fees, because they don't have a story to tell. A lot of them were so reliant on SuperSport was your entire storyline. When they decide, no, we're not going to broadcast your sport anymore, what are they going to do? They're going to have to be forced to create content of their own and find better ways of engaging with their fans.
Do you think there's an appetite for Canal Plus to get involved with women's football?
No, because Canal Plus doesn't want to be a rights holder. Canal Plus wants to be a broadcaster, and I think that the best way for women's football to grow in this country is a separate group of investors, specifically looking at 10 years, very much like how SA20 went. we have money, we have time. We want to build a great story, and we want to take this story and export it to the world. And we want to be separate. You can be a shareholder, Safa. You can be a shareholder PSL because some of your teams play in the league. But we have day-to-day control, and we built the funding models, we built the marketing around the league, and we export this thing to the rest of the world. That's how I think you grow South African women's football.
So last 2 points that I just want to speak about before we wrap it up. A very, very insightful conversation. The one is we speak about connection to fans, and a way that we can also connect to fans is merchandising.
Yeah.
I was actually at the launch of the national team jersey yesterday.
Did you get me a jersey?
No, I didn't. I didn't even get myself a jersey. What do you mean?
You don't have 2,000 rand?
Listen, when I saw that price tag, I was...
No, but there's a cheaper one for, I think, 1.6,
Yeah, it's still 1 point. That's a problem. No, I'm joking. So I was there, and, I was talking to, the people that were there, and it was nice. It was such a nice little event. You can see they created content around it, and maybe it's also because of the type of brand Adidas is, that they are also not slowly, but they are in the telling the stories and building content and all of that to be front of mind all the time. In women's football, there's a lack of merchandising.
Yeah.
And the lack comes from money.
Yeah.
You can't create merchandise without money, and you don't have money. You don't have money if you don't have sponsors. So how else can women's football teams connect to their audience and to their supporters through things like, here's a token, or if we already know that there's so many steps before that is not enabling us to get to the next step.
Do you know the story about Jersey Bird? There's a company called Jersey Bird on Instagram. They're an American company. They design football jerseys. The owner of that company said, I want to take a football club and make it professional. It was a semi-professional club at the time. He took that club. So he does this series where he'll say, I want to take a football jersey and redesign it in our style. And then if the team wants to collaborate to actually manufacture the jerseys, we'll manufacture them. And I'm using this example to kind of show, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. Jersey Bird they bought a club in Kenya. It had a clubhouse, which was basically, they had a little bit of budget to start with. They bought a clubhouse. From day one, everything was filmed. Everything, the story, this is what we're doing, this is what we're planning to do, this is our help us fundraise, etc. page. Go along with the story, and if you want to, help us, here's a fundraising. But there was from day one. And the intention was, this is a 4th-tier team, we want to take it to the Premier League in Kenya. They are now Premier League team in Kenya. Their jerseys are designed and made with the input of the public. I'm not saying take every football team in the Hollywood Bet Super League and make it a public pet project. Yeah. But I'm kind of showcasing an example of what happens when there's intention, and you can offer the fans a piece of the story, because the fans then say, okay, well, we would like to fund that. For example, former player Amanda Dlamini had a kit. It's not really a kit or merchandise deal, but she has a brand. A9D. Yeah. I know it used to be worn by JVW players. I don't know if it still is. And
maybe no, it's not. Nothing has been announced yet.
But it was. It used to be.
Year.
It used to be worn by JVW players. I don't know if it was an official agreement, but it again. I don't remember, and I know Amanda. I've spoken to her a number of times. I've asked her about this and whether she wants to do an official deal or not, and she can attest to it. But that's a great way for you to, because those ladies look great all the time. But that's a way that you can bridge the gap between fans and the players, is through merchandise. Yeah. But again, it's a partnership with somebody else who brings in something that you can't give them, right? And then you say, here it is to the public. Because again, if you bring the public into it, which is why I'm so big on the storytelling angle, if you bring the public into it, they understand your position, they understand what you're trying to do, they're much more willing to engage and to be part of the product.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. I think and it's not to say that that story is easily replicatable across the board, but yeah.
And then, just in closing, our plight is we want more sponsorships. We
Yep.
want a professional league. We want money. We want to create an environment where athletes are able to play without having to worry about a second job, a third job, this or that. So that at the end of the day, the product looks a lot better.
Yeah.
Because you know that there's focus on it.
Yeah.
In closing, what would be your recommendation just on industry leaders, in rights holders, club owners, players? What, in your opinion, should we be doing more of? And I guess this also speaks to why we started this podcast is we need to stop negative talk and need to try find solutions to the
Yeah.
problems. Obviously, evidently, it's not always going to be the case. But when we start speaking more about the good things and what football has done for players and for technical team or whatever the case is, people will resonate a lot better with the product. So,
Yeah.
parting shots.
That's hard. SAFA makes roughly 300 to 400 million in annual revenue. The PSL makes roughly 1.2 to 1.5 billion in annual revenue. Cricket South Africa generates about 1.8 billion in annual revenue. It should be about 2 billion now. SA Rugby is going to top 2 billion this year. They were at somewhere around 1.6 billion last year. Why I'm speaking about all of these is that money is hugely important. SAFA runs over 20 national teams, right? Then there's the Hollywood Bets Women's Super League, then there's beach soccer and the like. There's over 20 organizations. Within the confines of this pyramid that I've kind of structured for you, my belief is that the best thing for women's football is to be separate. And I've said this many times. But for the players, primarily, you have to export. The quicker you can export yourself through your story or whatever it is, the better. Right now, within the context of right now. But I truly believe that we can't do it with the current framework that we have. And the best framework is separation. Whether it's a league that sits between SAFA and the PSL, where PSL teams bring in and this is such a dodgy thing from Chelsea. I'm glad I'm not a Chelsea fan. Chelsea selling their own women's team to their own company. I mean, it's really, but the separation is really important because then you don't get women's teams being used like a little pawn or a thing to balance the checkbook or whatever it is. It's standalone. It's separate. Because there's a whole bunch of other things I could say. Increase the number of sponsorship allocations, etc., etc., etc.
I heard they're doing that though.
All of the things, and if they're doing it from next season, great. And this is probably the reason why Kaizer Chiefs has bought a club now, because I know that's one of the very big reasons why they were against it, is because then they can't commercialize it. And if they are, fantastic, but if it's separate and it stays within the on its own, and I think that's the secret sauce is you have to separate it. The players and everybody else will find their way once it's a standard, because yes, maybe initially you'll make less money, but nobody's really making money anyway. You ask any of the club owners, right now, whether anybody's making money, they would say no. So what's the point? There's no harm in starting afresh within a new standalone, purely focused to women's football league, because yeah, it's the biggest sport in the country, but it's far behind what others are doing. You know, cricket is starting now to move along. They brought on a professionalized women's league. It's also sponsored by Hollywood Bets.
Yeah.
They brought it along. I think it was three seasons ago.
Yeah.
Now. You know, rugby is starting this year, and I can tell you now they're going to move very quickly.
Yeah.
If you want to
Because there's
keep
intention
pace,
behind it.
yeah, if you want to keep pace with the rest, you gotta have a dedicated group. And I mean, SAFA, for all of the good work that they do, there's just not enough people to specifically manage this organization.
100%.
So, yeah, that would be my answer. And I thought and it's not really much of an answer because I've essentially regurgitated a whole bunch of stuff I said throughout the conversation. But that would be my answer.
But that's the beauty of the
fastest way to
conversation.
do it.
I don't think there's ever just a one-word answer or one sentence answer.
Yeah.
It's solutions, finding solutions to a problem. That's what it comes to.
And I mean, for everybody who's watching, it might seem as though I've been very negative. My personal view of women's football in this country is that it's got a great future if we can get out of each other's way and just let it grow on its own in its own dedicated path. And it's the same thing I would say for women's. It's where I said South African women's rugby will be competing for a World Cup.
Yeah.
2 World Cups from now. We've already competed for a World Cup in women's cricket.
That's true. Well, for the people at home, for me, he's one of the people who has always advocated for women's football. I think, and that's why I always like picking your brain and grabbing you, even though I only see you at events, and even though we've been speaking about a coffee, that has never happened. The little time that I always have with you, we always speak about how we can change the landscape, and it's never been anything negative. And I think it's so insightful, and it's important to have these conversations so that you're creating perspective for people. And I think that's we just need more minds to be switched on to try and find a common goal and solutions around, you know, what's currently happening. So thank you once again so much. I know this. I've cut it short. Those things that we didn't touch, but I think
There's always time for part 2. So
yes, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like we'll always have a part 2, because as things are happening, I mean, the world of women's football is changing. We saw the news breaking around CAF and all of that with the WAFCON. So there's a lot that we always need to unpack. And I know that's something that's... but I'll leave it at there. But to all the viewers at home, thank you so much for joining. I really do hope you've taken something from this conversation. And as we always say, be a part of it. Let us know what you want to hear, the people you want to see speak about women's football. And yeah, just let us know what you think. At the end of the day, it's for us to build a community of people who are working together progressively to enhance the women's game. It's the beautiful stories that we are telling you from the beautiful game. So until next time, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all of the works, and we will see you at the next episode.